Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. In this video, I want to talk about my reading journal, how I document my readings in a very low effort way, and also talk about the books that I've been reading for the past month. I've set myself up for a challenge where I read only books by one author for a month. And this month is Joan Didion. I'll talk about the challenge later. In total, I finished 4.5 books. And since I will be updating my reading journal anyway, this was a perfect excuse for me to share with you my current reading journal system. So let's get started. So whenever I start reading a book and want to write something down, I will first come to this Muji A6 notebook. This is my catch-all or commonplace book that I carry around all the time. I use it for everything, not only for readings, but also for to-do list, brain dump, things that I want to remember, etc. This is an old notebook that I have for several years now, and I never find a good use for it. And sadly, I have 3 more to go through. I use this to collect my thoughts and quotes that caught my eye while I'm reading. In here, I don't mind if it's messy or out of order, because most of the time I read more than one book at the same time. It is just for jotting down things that I want to remember quickly. Then, after I finish reading a book, I will transfer the notes along with my more polished thoughts into this A5 journal. This is a Midori A5 dot grid notebook, and I create my own layout here. The setup is fairly simple. The first 2 pages are reserved for index. Since the MD notebook is not numbered, I also number the pages along the way. Whenever I finish an entry, I will write the title down and add the page number on this index page. And after this index page are all of my reading entries. I started this journal at the beginning of this year, and I'm not planning to divide the reading journal by year, which means I will keep using this same notebook until I run out of pages. Normally, I use 2 pages for each book review, where on the left-hand side, I print out a book cover using sticker paper, then write down some basic informations. And on the bottom of the page, I will write my thoughts. And for the right-hand side, I will copy down the quotes from the book. I decided to create my own layout because I want to have the freedom of using however many pages I want for each book. Sometimes if I love a book so much, I might need more than 1 page of space for quotes. For example, this book, I used 3 pages for the quotes. Other times, if I don't have much to say about a book, I can use only 1 page and not worry about leaving any empty pages. I am very happy with this current setup because it really takes off the pressure of making the reading journal perfect on the first try. There is no need to reserve or pre-plan any pages in here, and I also keep the decoration very minimal so that it won't take me much time or effort to update. This is actually my first physical reading journal, and I want to make sure it was as low maintenance as possible for me to reach for it after reading. Before this, I was tracking my reading in Storygraph and writing down my thoughts in Notion. I realized that I was focusing more on the number of books that I read rather than the quality of each read. When I look back at my reading history, I can't really recall what the books that I've read were about, or sometimes I don't even remember if I've read a certain book. I want to use this physical journal to help me retain the information and also organize my thoughts. So far, I've been really enjoying it. Now let's talk about the monthly challenge that I did for this month. I came up with this idea a while ago when I was visiting a bookstore, and I was thinking about how I wanted to read an author to get to know them better. But if I only read one book from them, I would not know enough. And if I read all the books, or most of the books by the same author altogether, maybe I can connect the dots. That's why I decided to focus on one author for the past month and only read books by them and see how it goes. I picked Joan Didion as my first author because I'm always curious about her work. I have read her 2 memoirs before, The Year of Magical Thinking and Blue Nights, which I love very much, but I've never read her fiction or essays. So I started this month with one of her most famous essay collection, Slouching Towards Bethlehem. For this one, I was really struck by her journalistic style. I've never read this new journalism style before, and I was really fascinated by the way she mixed personal and journalistic style together. A lot of her books or essays are about California in the 60s and 70s, which is not a topic that I'm familiar with, but it's very interesting to read. Though I'm still more drawn to the essays about her own life. In this book in particular, I love the essay called On Keeping a Notebook, where she explains that her notebook is not a factual record, but a tool to remember how it felt to her. It is very interesting to see how she, as a writer, used the notebooks and what those entries meant to her. I really want to come back to this essay and read it again. Maybe I'll try to keep a notebook like Joan Didion and try it out myself. The next is the White Album. This is another collection of essays from early 70s. This is probably the one I feel the least connected with. She covered a lot of important cultural and political shifts of the era, which I think is a very important read, but just not my personal favorite. Then I read Play It As It Lays, which is the only fiction that I read this month. The writing in here is very fragmented, and each chapter is only a couple pages long. I kept getting confused about the timeline and the narrator, but then realized that this was just how Didion shows the mental state of the protagonist. It is kind of a depressing book. I also read another essay collection called Let Me Tell You What I Mean, which is a later published essay collection. I no longer have the physical copy in here because I borrowed it from the library. I think there are a couple of interesting essays in there, one called Why I Write and one called Telling Stories, where she reflected on her writing and also showed some background on how she wrote her novel. And currently, I am still reading the most recent book called Notes to Joan, but I'm only halfway through. After reading all those books, I still think that my favorite book from Didion is The Year of Magical Thinking. She documented the year following the sudden death of her husband. And it is about grief and how she coped with loss. It is very raw and vulnerable. So I would highly recommend you read this book if you haven't read Joan Didion before. Overall, I really enjoy doing this challenge because otherwise I will never finish reading all these books. Since I gave myself a deadline and a full TBR list, I was fully committed to it. I also want to make sure I remember all of them, so I used my Muji notebook heavily this month. Also, since I borrowed books from the library, I need to write the quotes and thoughts down because I can't make any notation on the physical book. This two-step journaling process definitely made my reading experience better, and I'm glad I have this system, and it will probably stay like this for a long time. Do you have a reading journal? What is your setup? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!